Join me as I dig deep into the most common myths about depression and see if I can bust them all once and for all. Depression is a topic that's very close to my heart, and I think it's really important to talk about it because there's so much misinformation out there. There are so many myths and misconceptions that can be really harmful and prevent people from seeking the help that they need. So today, I want to debunk some of those myths and set the record straight about what depression really is and how it affects people. One of the main reasons I want to do this is because mental health awareness is still not where it needs to be. There are still too many people out there who don't understand depression, who don't think it's a real illness, or who think that people can just snap out of it. And that's just not true. Depression is a serious condition that affects millions of people around the world, and it's time we started taking it seriously. So over the next few minutes, I'm going to be sharing some of the most common myths about depression, and then I'm going to give you the facts. I want to educate you about what depression really is, and how it affects people. And I hope that by the end of this video, you'll have a better understanding of this condition and how we can all work together to support people who are struggling. So let's get started. It's just sadness. That's one of the most common myths about depression. People think that depression is just a feeling of sadness, that it's just a normal part of life. But depression is so much more than that. It's a serious mental health condition that affects the way you think, feel, and behave. It's not just about feeling sad, it's about feeling hopeless, helpless, and worthless. It's about having no energy, no motivation, and no interest in things that you used to love. You can just snap out of it. This is another common myth, and it's really frustrating because it's just not true. Depression is not something that you can snap out of. It's not something that you can just get over, or move on from. It's a serious condition that requires treatment, and it's not something that you can just shake off. Depression is a personal weakness. This myth is really damaging because it makes people feel ashamed or embarrassed about their depression. They think that they're somehow flawed or weak because they're struggling with this condition. But depression is not a personal weakness, it's a serious mental health condition that can affect anyone. Depression is just an excuse. This myth is really harmful because it makes people think that depression is not a real illness. They think that people are just using it as an excuse to get out of work or to get attention. But depression is a serious condition that can be debilitating. It's not something that people can just use as an excuse, it's a real condition that requires real treatment. Depression only affects people who have had traumatic experiences. This myth is really limiting because it makes people think that depression only affects people who have been through something traumatic. But depression can affect anyone regardless of their background or experiences. It's not just about trauma, it's about chemical imbalances in the brain, genetics, and a whole range of other factors. You're just being lazy. This myth is really frustrating because it makes people think that depression is somehow a choice, that people are just being lazy and not trying hard enough. But depression is not about being lazy, it's about struggling to get out of bed in the morning, struggling to face the day, and struggling to find the motivation to do anything. Depression is just a phase. This myth is really damaging because it makes people think that depression is somehow temporary, that it will just pass with time. But depression is a serious condition that requires treatment and support. It's not something that will just go away on its own, it needs to be addressed and treated. Depression is a spiritual problem. This myth is really limiting because it makes people think that depression is somehow a spiritual or moral failing. But depression is a serious mental health condition that requires medical treatment. It's not about being spiritually lost or morally weak. It's about chemical imbalances in the brain and a whole range of other factors. You're not trying hard enough. This myth is really frustrating because it makes people think that depression is somehow their fault, that they're not trying hard enough to get better. But depression is not something that you can just try harder to get over. It's a serious condition that requires treatment and support. Depressed people are just seeking attention. This myth is really harmful because it makes people think that depression is somehow a cry for help or an attention-seeking behavior. But depression is a serious condition that requires real treatment and support. It's not about seeking attention, it's about struggling to survive. Depression is just a female problem. This myth is really limiting because it makes people think that depression only affects women. But depression can affect anyone regardless of gender, age, or background. You're just being dramatic. This myth is really frustrating because it makes people think that depression is somehow an overreaction or an exaggeration. But depression is a serious condition that requires real treatment and support. It's not about being dramatic, it's about struggling to cope. Depression is just a result of a poor lifestyle. This myth is really damaging because it makes people think that depression is somehow their fault, that they're not living a healthy enough lifestyle. But depression is a serious condition that can affect anyone regardless of their lifestyle choices. Depression is a rational response to circumstances. This myth is really limiting because it makes people think that depression is somehow a rational or logical response to difficult circumstances. But depression is a serious mental health condition that requires medical treatment. It's not about being rational or logical, it's about chemical imbalances in the brain and a whole range of other factors. Did you know that the World Health Organization estimates that depression affects over 300 million people around the world? That's a staggering number, and it's proof that depression is not just a personal problem, but a global health crisis. One of the most shocking things I've learned about depression is that it can actually shrink your brain. Research has shown that people with depression have a smaller hippocampus, the part of the brain that's responsible for learning and memory. This is just one example of how depression can have a real, physical impact on the brain. Depression is not just about feeling sad, it's about having a serious mental health condition that requires real treatment and support. It's about having a condition that can affect your relationships, your work, and your overall well-being. It's time to start taking depression seriously. It's time to start treating it as the serious mental health condition that it is, rather than just dismissing it as sadness or weakness. We need to start talking about depression openly and honestly, and we need to start supporting people who are struggling. So what can you do to help? First, educate yourself about depression. Learn about the facts, learn about the myths, and learn about how you can support people who are struggling. Second, speak out about depression. Share your own experiences, share your own struggles, and help to break the stigma surrounding this condition. And finally, reach out to people who are struggling. Offer them support, offer them love, and offer them a listening ear. In conclusion, I hope that today's video has helped to debunk some of the common myths about depression. I hope that you've learned something new, and I hope that you'll share what you've learned with others. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and click on the bell for more health tips and updates.